The Great Depression was the biggest economic disaster in American history. During the 1920s, investing in the stock market was viewed by many Americans as an easy way to grow wealth, and so became a popular repository for American investment. As a result, the crash of 1929, when the Dow Jones average crashed by over 30%, ended in the loss of more than $14 million. This marked the beginning of the Great Depression. One of the most pressing issues of the Great Depression was pervasive homelessness. After the crash of 1929, millions of people lost their homes and were forced onto the streets. Shantytowns called Hoovervilles started popping up all across the nation. The Hoovervilles housed 100 to 1,000 homeless people. Hoovervilles were named after the 31st President of the United States, President Herbert Hoover. Hoover was in office during the beginning of the Great Depression. He faced cruel judgment by Congress and was seen as a heartless president. The term Hoovervilles was coined by America's poor and non-poor alike, making fun of Hoover by claiming that he was the reason people were homeless. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt easily defeated Hoover in the next presidential election. Roosevelt invented the Strategic New Deal to boost the American economy during the Great Depression. The New Deal was a turning point in American history because the government's revolutionary intervention in Americans' daily financial lives provided the means of escaping economic disaster on the level of the individual and the nation. Roosevelt's groundbreaking relief program aided countless Americans. He remained in office for 4 terms. Roosevelt brought hope to the people of the United States during a seemingly hopeless time. His famous quote, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," exemplifies his no-nonsense and galvanizing reassurance. The strategy of the New Deal was to pay unemployed Americans to build crucial public facilities that would improve the country. This advanced the nation from the economic slump and gave individuals financial stability. The workers constructed airports, dams, hospitals, and national parks. In short, the federal government found meaningful work that helped its citizens by offering much-needed employment while also building up the nation's infrastructure. The New Deal created many organizations to ease financial burdens on American families and improve their lives. One famous example was the Works Progress Association, or the WPA. The WPA provided federal employment to Americans throughout the 1930s. Some famous works built by the New Deal include Yellowstone National Park, Rocky Mountain National Park, and Grand Canyon National Park. All of these public parks were constructed by WPA workers, helping both the nation and the individuals who manufactured them. And the national parks didn't just help out during the Great Depression. According to the U.S. Department of the Interior, a record high of $30.5 billion was made in visitor spendings in communities near national parks in 2022. This is an example of how the New Deal's work is benefiting the country today. The New Deal built Hoover Dam during the Great Depression and named it in honor of President Herbert Hoover. An example of an airport built by the New Deal is LaGuardia Airport in New York. Both of these very famous pieces of infrastructure are an example of how the New Deal's works are still visible in the country to this day. The Great Depression brought many hardships upon families. Because workers were losing their jobs so frequently, countless families did not have the money needed to support themselves. Dorothy Lang, a famous photographer, traveled across the United States and documented these desperate conditions to shed light on the major issues of the 1930s. Her work became known as the Migrant Mother series. In an interview with Great Depression survivors Anna Marie and Raymond McIntyre, they respond to a question about how the WPA helped them. They say, "The WPA really kind of saved my family. From then on, my dad had a job. It was $15 a week, but that was good at the time." This is an example of how the New Deal helped families struggling to regain financial stability. The WPA also housed workers and their families in WPA worker camps. These camps became popular throughout the country and provided running water, shelter, and other essential services. Some camps offered religious gathering areas or community halls, giving camps a feeling of a regular neighborhood. However, the New Deal could not provide for everyone, and thousands of citizens, including countless children, were still homeless during the 1930s. During the Great Depression, homelessness and unemployment were not the only pressing problems. Many American parents without money had trouble supporting their children. Kids had to work odd jobs, most times too strenuous for a child's strength, to help provide for their families. They went without proper hygiene and food. Most American children could not attend school because they were needed to help provide food and other essential items for their families. The New Deal intervened in family life at the level of the child by organizing educational programs and fun events for children. Talent shows, plays, and science classes were among the activities kids had the opportunity to attend. The goal was to ensure that American children could continue learning during the Depression. The New Deal also provided free school lunches for all needy kids. This practice is still widely available to this day and traces all the way back to the New Deal. Franklin Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act in 1935, another addition to his New Deal. It was designed to pay retired workers 65 and older a continuing income after retirement. The Social Security Act provided general welfare benefits and a working social insurance program. This was a crucial movement for the country's social security system and is another example of a pivotal creation by the New Deal that is still around today. During the Great Depression, a massive dust bowl hit America's Midwest. The severe drought and resulting dust storms made farming impossible. Countless farmers were forced to sell their farms or had their farms foreclosed on by banks. Many previously successful farming families went bankrupt. With limited employment options in the Midwest, many migrated to the Pacific Northwest, where seasonal work and sunshine promised prosperity. The New Deal aided countless migrant farmers who were destitute upon their arrival to the Pacific Northwest after the Dust Bowl. The WPA helped give migrant farmers jobs on commercial farms and housed them in camps like the other WPA workers. However, the New Deal could not help all homeless farmers. Many families from the Midwest struggled to find jobs during the Great Depression and lived in ditch camps or on the sides of roads. Numerous people died due to lack of food, water, good sanitation, or proper shelter. During the 1930s, most women were not employed. Most Americans believed that women belonged in the home. The jobs they could have were very segregated. Teachers, secretaries, and nurses were common occupations for American women during the early 1900s. After the Depression hit, more women were pushed back into the home, now expected to take care of their families on an even stricter budget. In response, Franklin Roosevelt broke barriers by hiring educated political women to help lead the country. These women were female New Dealers and revolutionized the women's rights movement. By the 1940s, many women had joined branches of the workforce that used to be segregated from females. During the 1930s, African Americans faced widespread discrimination. Last hired, first fired was a cruel joke used during the time because of how hard it was for African Americans to be employed. African American unemployment rates doubled or tripled those of whites. The Great Depression only made their work search harder. African Americans were skeptical as to how the New Deal would benefit them, with the rampant segregation across the country. However, Franklin Roosevelt was a very popular president amongst black citizens. Roosevelt had many African American advisors and was known for his inclusiveness to all American citizens. He gained many votes and supporters for the New Deal and his campaign from African Americans. Native Americans were also greatly helped by the New Deal. Native Americans had already been suffering from centuries of displacement and cruel treatment from American colonists. President Franklin Roosevelt launched the Indian Reorganization Act, or the IRA, to aid Native Americans during the Great Depression. The law became known as the Indian New Deal and restored Native Americans' land to their tribes, provided more educational opportunities, and began allowing them to self-govern within their reservations. The IRA improved the Native Americans' lives, and it also strengthened the relationship between the federal government and the Native Americans. Although the New Deal aided many Americans' lives, some groups were completely overlooked. Mexican immigrants arguably faced the most strife during the Great Depression. As more people began to look for work, unrest between immigrant workers and the government grew. As a result, the government issued a program that expelled a massive amount of the Mexican American population during the 1930s. This mass deportation of Mexican Americans ended with roughly 1 million Mexican Americans being ripped from their homes, as well as major trauma for those who managed to stay in the U.S. Other races, such as Asian Americans, were not affected as much by the New Deal. The Great Depression was much harder for them. Despite these issues, the New Deal was invented to get America through the Great Depression. It gave unemployed workers a purpose, a way to survive and continue making money. The New Deal was a turning point in American history because the government's intervention in Americans' daily lives allowed both the nation and the individual citizens to escape the economic disaster. After the Great Depression, the impacts of the New Deal were still apparent in America. The new public works the WPA had constructed, like the national parks, airports, and other structures, continue to help the country to this day. The recovery of American families, businesses, and the overall economy was huge. The New Deal changed many aspects of American life and shaped the way we think about the economy to this day.